Lost Private. We're in Normandy.
Thanks for checking in here at the We're Not Lost Private podcast. We appreciate all your support. But do you know how else you can support us? By signing up at Patreon. For $3 a month, you'll have access to all of our episodes, plus access to all kinds of bonus material, like our quarterly newsletter, photographs, and official paperwork, and research that goes into each and every show. You can follow the pod on a multitude of platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere you catch your pods. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Welcome, everyone, to episode 45 of the We're Not Lost Private podcast. And I'm really happy to welcome back to the show my friend Josh Donohue. Josh is uh, adjunct professor of history at the Farmingdale State College and also Suffolk County Community College. He's a prolific writer and presenter. He's appeared on World War II TV. And those of you that caught episode 17 here, you saw his wake show and what a dynamite presentation that was. Josh has an article that is out now in World War II History Magazine, the fall 2025 issue about this very topic. We're gonna kind of rewind, go back to some Marine roots for me, and talk about Pearl Harbor. And Josh is basically going to kick off a spate of Pacific theater related shows that I'll talk about near the end of the episode. But with that, Josh, welcome back, pal. It's good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me back, and looking forward to getting on it.
Oh, come on, man. I'm always happy to talk Marine stuff. Let's do this,
Awesome.
man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Plenty of good material there for the Marines, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's all yours. Go ahead and drive. It's all you now.
Okay, so yeah, I was just going to just kind of do the lead in on my article. It's out actually now in World War II History Magazine, and it's took me quite a while to do. I kind of stretched it out over a couple of years. The research I was doing, and I kind of go through these. You kind of pick it up, you put it down again. But the story of Ewa itself kind of hit my radar around the time of when I was in grad school, and I was doing all the Pearl Harbor research, and Ewa was really a major part of why the American carriers weren't in Pearl Harbor that morning. Reason being, we'll get a little bit more into it, but planes from Ewa were on board the USS Enterprise and the USS Lexington. The Enterprise was ferrying the echelon of VMF 211 to Wake Island. We talked about that again last time, and the Lexington was taking aircraft from Ewa VMSB 231, Vought Vindicators, but they would never get there. They were alerted of the attack and they turned around. So we have Ewa Field to thank for the American carriers not being there that morning.
Yeah,
So I'm just going to go to
if
see
I
if I,
can, I'm gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna pump Josh's tires a little bit here. I uh I read the article, and he talks about the research involved and how long it took him to complete the article. And I can tell you from the opening paragraphs of the article, it's readily apparent that you spent a lot of time researching in great detail, because it starts off from the Japanese point of view. And
Yes.
I want to throw that out there as a plug for everybody to go get a copy of the magazine or catch it online at the Warfare History Network. It's
Here
a
it is.
dynamite article. There you go.
Shameless plug.
There you go.
The one where it says Pearl Harbor's Mystery Marine there. So
Yeah, and
out Barnes and Noble and wherever you can buy it. So it's yeah, I'm immensely proud of it. It's like you just mentioned. I appreciate it. I really when I set out to do these things, and the as right now as prolific as of a writer as I've kind of been over the last couple, maybe a year or two. And once I finished this and kind of other projects started to come up to light, jumping on those and doing podcasts and all, so it's definitely kept me busy. But the research was really fascinating because, as I'll show your viewers in a little bit, the airfield is still there. It's obviously abandoned. It's been abandoned since the 50s, and really stopped being used altogether in really 1960 to be exact. So if you're able, I think you're able to see the image on the screen.
it's up. Yes.
That is, this is actually pretty rare. It's one of the more famous paintings of depicting the attack on Ewa Field on December 7th, 1941. So a lot of people don't really realize a lot of the time, that there were other areas attacked on Oahu. It wasn't just, the battleships being torpedoed and bombed from the air. Of course, you had Hickam Field, which is right next to Pearl Harbor. That was attacked, and again, there was a heavy loss of life there as well. You had Kaneohe Naval Air Station, which was being attacked over on the eastern side of Oahu. You had Wheeler Army Airfield being attacked, and Schofield Barracks right next to it. And of course, Ford Island, the airfield in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And you also had Bellows Field, which was an auxiliary strip. That was just attacked by maybe one or two Zeros. A couple of pilots were attempting to take off in their P-40s, and they were unfortunately shot down.
I
So
think I think
Evo,
of all these actions, I think Hickam is probably the most widely known for a
yeah,
number of reasons, and I want to say Wheeler as well, but this one definitely came out of left field. I know there were several Marine elements that were hit during the attack, uh, but I had never read deeply on the topic, so I'm so glad you're here presenting on it.
yeah, and it's an interesting story, doing the deep dive stuff on the history of, really whatever came from. It's really humble beginnings, and I'll kind of get into it. What you're seeing here is the old entranceway to the guard booth where you see right at the center. On Google Earth, and I'll show you, when I pull it up, you can still see the foundations for the archway on either side, the coral lava rock. It's still there on either side, and the guard booth, I believe, is the original one still there. Uh, Obviously, Ewa, as I mentioned, is abandoned currently, but I love the sign on the top, the United States Marines Immortal Pilots, and my immediate when I first saw this photo, John Bond is the guy who provided it to me. He's a Ewa historian. He's been studying the battle and the current efforts underway to preserve the battlefield for many, I mean, for decades. The Wake Island, Paul Putnam's name is up there, and of course, doing the study on him and doing all the Wake stuff. The commander of VMF 211, he was obviously based there. And you have all the other campaigns. You see this photo was probably taken probably after World War II, maybe in late 40s to early 1950s or so. So
Yeah,
Ewa
of,
is,
of note, the Guadalcanal and Major Joe Foss. Actually, when
yeah,
I flew out of Iraq in 2003, I landed at the Joe Foss Expeditionary Airfield in Kuwait, which was nothing more than a strip of sand
yeah.
with a fire extinguisher at the center point.
So you also notice Gregory Pappy Boyington's name up there under the New Georgia. So the pilots at Ewa were, the Marine aviators there did some remarkable things. I think about Henry Elrod, who was earned the Medal of Honor during the Battle of Wake Island. His piloting, he shot down numerous Japanese bombers during the time. He sunk the Japanese destroyer with a 100-pound bomb. So these pilots were courageous in every which way. So the airfield itself is interesting because it was originally intended to be really a hub, if you will, for dirigibles, for Zeppelins of the time. And the mooring mast, as we see here. The original one was constructed in 1925, and it was known as Ewa Mooring Mast Field. So the site was around 900 acres when it was purchased by the Navy. It included the construction of a single runway along with 170, around 160, 170-foot mooring mast that was completed, as you can see in the inset photo, in 1925. So it was again during this time that the Navy was experimenting with the use of airships. Again, of course, that they used during World War One, and their effectiveness was still being tested, of course, at the time. And that once they were put into really frontline service, Ewa was going to be used as a major operational station for the expansion of the Z craft program. So by 1935, unfortunately, the Navy's airships, the most notable, the Shenandoah, which I'll kind of hop out again, not to confuse you to go back. The Shenandoah was actually going to be headed to Everfield, and it was part of the actual plans that I'll show you in a moment. There's a series of schematics that were drawn up by the Navy and plans where exactly Mooramask was going to be. But by 1935, three of the airships, the Shenandoah, as you see here, crashed in 1925 in Ohio. It was caught in a storm. The USS Macon was lost in 1935, and the USS Akron was lost in 1933. So Eva's really purpose as an airship docking or mooring station pretty much goes out the window with the loss of all the naval airships. So pretty much at this point, and of course you have the crash of the Hindenburg taking place in Lakehurst in 1937. So at that point, Eva's role begins to change, and over time, the Navy starts to come up with plans to repurpose it no longer as an airship station, but actually for an airfield. But as I'll show you in a moment, the evolution of the airstrip there is an interesting story in itself. This is the schematic I was telling you about. You can see the mooring mast really in the middle of it, the USS Shenandoah, how on this diagram it was going to look, and the Eva plantation, as you see on the upper left-hand corner. So the the acreage there was quite expansive, and they had plenty of room to not only build a single airstrip, but as we'll see after really during and really after World War II, the airfield just expands and expands. And what's interesting about it, as I'll show you on Google Earth, is the airfield in its current form, in its ruined form, almost looks exactly like the original. Instead of the rest of it, the extra runways and taxiways were taken over by a golf course, which is on the bucket list, by the way. I'm an avid golfer, and if I ever get to Hawaii, I am going to be playing the Barbers Point golf course. That's for sure. I may lose a few balls over the fence and be running around the airfield doing history stuff, but
What's
this is what it
interesting
would.
is what's
Yeah,
interesting is it only took a few accidents over a few years for them for the Navy to relook it's the utility of the airships, especially with the onset of fixed wing operations coming. The utility of them obviously driven way down to the point where during World War II, airships essentially become barrage balloon versions of themselves. Uh,
yeah.
just interesting to see that change, that evolution, and the utility of them, and the repurposing of assets and have them allocated towards fixed wing operations.
Exactly. And like I said, what happens at this point with the abandonment really of the operations of really repurposing the tower. They cut the tower down to about 77 feet, as you see here, and now making it to an aircraft control tower, tethered down to the ground, as you see there. It was not exactly the proper air control tower you're looking for, but you're looking to sort the Marines obviously are getting as they typically do. you know the Navy gets all the good stuff and the Marines get the hand me
The
downs.
short
So
shrifted
this
again.
is kind of a good example of that. So the Eva's now being repurposed for a proper airfield, as you see here. And this is really in effect what the airfield and the conditions in and around the area. It's kind of more of an industrial area on the sort of the northern outskirts of it. But this configuration you see on the map is really what it looked like. And following the outbreak of war on September 1st, 1939, Congress would allocate funds to help again bolster the defenses of the Hawaiian Islands. So as I mentioned, the mooring mast tower was lowered in the 1930s and repurposed as the control tower. The base was recommissioned in February of 1941, and now the 2nd Marine Aircraft Group, MAG 2, which would be based in Eva upon its arrival from San Diego, would become officially Marine Corps Air Station Eva. So MAG 2's forward echelon would approximately 100 officers, around 800 enlisted men, would embark on the USS Enterprise on January 11th of 1941, arriving at Pearl Harbor on the 21st. And the elements that go to Wake Island, Paul Putnam and his pilots are among them. So Eva's base facilities include a barracks, a swimming pool, a dispensary. Infrastructure was still really in a heavy state of construction by the time the Marines arrived there. And I'll just see if I can get to.
Right now, we can see your slide deck,
Okay.
and it
All
is
right. So, it was.
the Ava 29 January 1941 photograph, aerial photograph.
Okay. Let me just take a look here. And, okay. Okay. If we can look at.
It's interesting to see your slide 6 and slide 7, the construction. They obviously put in the other runway. And for folks who are not familiar with runway operations, technically you'll have two runways are as part of one runway complex at the very least. And generally the runway numbers will indicate their compass bearing. So if you're on, say, runway 1735, that's your degree headings on your compass as you're coming in. When you look at it, depending on which direction you're coming into the runway. But yeah, it's austere at best on the 29 January 1941 photograph. They haven't even,
The runway
looks
number.
like they haven't even laid the other runway in yet.
Yeah. So what's the runways, as you see,
Sorry, folks, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty here with the presentation, and we're gonna have to iron this out. Josh, can you hear me?
yeah, a little
Yeah.
bit.
Sorry about that. We had a little bit of a
Yeah, I
technical
got you. Sorry about that.
issue, guys. Bear with us.
Zoom, yeah, Zoom kind of quit on it, I guess, right?
It's having a moment today, folks.
Are
It's
you
having a
able to
moment.
see? Are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, we have the Google Maps view of
Okay.
the island.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the map here, and let's see if this works.
Yeah, for our listeners on our pods, we've got an overview of the island up on Google Maps right now, and Josh is going to orient us to where we're at, and then we'll kick back over to the other slideshow, I believe.
Okay, let me. Okay, here we go. Can you see the map is up, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to zoom in, and are
So
you able to see
yep.
the overview of Ford Island? You can see Pearl Harbor
Yeah,
from the
so we're on
air.
the south side of the island, looking down in it overhead. But this is a modern view of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
please.
So you could, if you'll notice, right the center of Pearl Harbor, where Battleship Row was, right along here. You can see the Arizona Memorial, the USS Utah on the other side, the Missouri, uh, where of course the surrender takes place on September 2nd of 1945. There's a lot of things to still see. It's interesting. If you come out and just go about 7 miles over, you will find Ewa Field, which is right here at the center.
Oh, there's Barber's Point Golf Course, just like you
Yeah,
said.
exactly. This is so what's interesting on the layout of this on the map, if you kind of look at it, it kind of makes an A shape. So if you go from this part of the air, which is the actual old airstrip, which I'm going up and down here,
Right.
from down to Bismarck Sea Road up to Essex, that triangular part is really what was absorbed into the solar farm, as you see there in the golf course, which was the outer runways, which were built during 1942, 1943, and its final configuration. So
Yeah.
what's really fascinating about Eva, and there again are efforts underway to preserve the battlefield. I mean, it's for the most part still there. Right there is the concrete warm up platform,
Yep.
and that's again the original. And is this rectangular spot right here was an old hangar. We'll get to that in a moment. So the base itself, like I said, looks just like it did, when the base was struck in 1941 when the Japanese attacked. So it's pretty interesting how, over time, it hasn't been really built over, and there are, as I mentioned, preservation efforts underway to to preserve the airfield, because they have a ceremony, and I'll kind of zoom back in. There's a flagpole right there in that spot where they have the Marine garrison walk out, raise the flag, and do a ceremony at Evetts. It's again one of the smaller ones and lesser known ones. All the activities obviously taking place out over Pearl Harbor, obviously along Battleship Row, the Arizona Memorial, and all that.
For those of you who are listening to this, I highly recommend, if you get a chance, to hop on Google Earth and take a quick look at it. You can clearly see, despite all the overgrowth, the outline of the runway. I mean, it is
Yeah,
readily apparent, and it's pretty cool to see the vegetation that has tried to basically take back what it is theirs, but it's still there, plain as day.
Compass Rose is right here. That square piece you see there. And if, as I was mentioning, that shot of Eva's Gate, and I'll point that out in the northern part, which is on Geiger Road. And if we zoom in right here, there's one side, and the arch would go
Yeah,
over
there you go.
right over to the other side of there. That's the foundation for it. And here's the guard station, still there to this day. So there's still, remnants and reminders of Eva. And if you go down this access road, you're literally right on one of the taxiways.
Yep.
And there's another area up here, which I'll point out to you in a moment. This whole section up here above the concrete was where the planes were parked. So from right around up here, coming across here
It
and
was the
down,
hard stand.
was the other part of Eva's parking area, where all the planes were parked that morning. So I will shift over back to the slides.
Yeah, pretty amazing aerial work on Google Maps if you get a chance. Again, like I said, you can clearly see the outline of the major portions of the base, and like Josh said, you could even see where the remnants of the arch that greeted people who drove up to Ava. So it's pretty amazing that the stuff is still there. And I always love when that happens, that you can go back and kind of go back in time if you visit a site and see that stuff. In October, to follow up with the Pacific thread that Josh is kicking off, that'll run through the end of the year, interspersed with the other shows we'll be doing. In October, Dave Holland's going to be coming on and talk Guadalcanal and Matanikau battles. He's got a book that's coming out in October, which is I've been looking forward to. And in November, Andrew Bohr is going to come on and talk about Iwo Jima flag raiser Harlan Block and his 7 high school buddies that joined the Marine Corps with him. I'm really looking forward to having both of them on to complete at least that portion of our Pacific Theater trifecta. And I'm working to get Stephen McLeod back on. And I think we're just going to do a show on the Marine NCO in combat, but we're going to focus on Fox of Company 23rd Marines. But it's going to be, we're just going to talk about Marine NCOs in combat during World War II. And I think those of you who caught our Black Dragon show with Steve will really get a lot out of that. And if you've read his book, you'll definitely get a lot out of that.
The attack, when it takes place, the base is still under construction, and there are, just breaking ground. As I'll mention, the swimming pool will come in handy. It wasn't even completed; it was just the wooden framework was there. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the base was still under heavy construction. There was ground was broken for a dispensary. There was, made by the recent appropriation, the redesignation of Mag 2 to Mag 21 now on August 1st of 1941, and redesignation of the headquarters squadron. Commander Lieutenant Colonel Claude Larkin would be taking over as the CO, and he would be the senior naval aviator present in those early months of World War II, in 1941 and going to 1942. So the establishment of the air station at Wake Island, which was 2,000 miles west of Hawaii, was announced by the 14th Naval District. And shortly after Larkin was taking over MAG 21, one of his first orders was to again organize the enlisted men being sent to Wake on the USS Wright on November 19th of 1941, really for special temporary duty in connection with advanced base exercises. So Major Walter L.J. Baylor, who would become the last man off Wake Island, would be among those as well. And Robert Connerman, who was head of the forward echelon of VMF 211. Connerman actually would lose his life when the Japanese attacked there on December 8th, 1941, about 4 hours after Pearl was attacked. So on November 27th, yeah.
So Larkin's a real interesting character to me because he's a prior enlisted service member. He's a Mustanger, and he comes in with some interesting ideas and just starts putting his stamp on the unit early on, right?
Yeah, he's just, in doing a study on him and all the his biography when I the great people at the special collection at the in Quantico, the Marine Corps History Division, just gave me just so many great pieces of info. And the stuff on Larkin's interesting. He was actually a horseman. He was out in Washington State and Oregon. He went to the University of Washington for a short time. He was back, herding cattle in Chicago in like 1915. And once World War One the outbreak of World War One happens, he enlists into the Marines, and his first assignment is actually aboard the USS Oklahoma, which of course would be, famously, sunk in the opening moments of the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was actually on board the ship when it was commissioned. So he was about a year and a half as an enlisted man. He went to candidate's class commission in Washington, D.C., and he was commissioned as second lieutenant in 1917, and actually went to Cuba for a time for joining the mounted troops known as the Horse Marines. So between the two world wars, Larkin served between Cuba and Haiti. He was in China at one point. He was in the Virgin Islands at one point. So he was all over, the map. He transferred to aviation in 1930, had his flight training in Pensacola, and then was designated as a naval aviator in 1930. So he would also attend the Army Air Corps Tactical School in Montgomery, Alabama, and the Navy War College in Newport, Rhode Island. So what's interesting about him is his morning when the Japanese are attacking. He's driving from his house in, I believe, Honolulu, and he is being strafed by Japanese Zeros. He has to abandon his car, I believe, twice as he's on his way to Eva that morning, narrowly missing, being struck and killed or whatever the case is by the Japanese. Gets back in his car, drives to Eva, and by the time he arrives in the parking lot, the entire parking lot is being strafed relentlessly by the Japanese. If anything had four wheels on it, it was pretty good chance the Japanese were going to put a hole in it, including the base ambulance. There's famous pictures. There's a hole square right in the middle of the windshield. I think the ambulance took like 50 bullet holes or something like that. So Larkin arrives to a scene of chaos. The airfield is the planes are on fire. All the cars in the parking lot are being shot up. He sustained some minor wounds, I believe, on one of his knuckles and the lower part of his leg and his foot. But as the consummate Marine and professional, he stays with it and keeps directing the defense of the base with his men. So
stays in the fight. Yeah,
stays in the fight. Yeah, that's
comments,
exactly what you want to see.
Your comments about his early duty stations. I know you said he was all over the map, but really the ones you highlighted were generally part of the normal rotational cycle for Marine deployments back then. A lot of the banana war level stuff where you're in the Caribbean and South America, and then China, of course, was on a normal rotation for Marines there as well. So while it sounds like, oh, these are all kind of disparate, it's actually normal cycling for Marine deployments, and then of course shipboard, which he also had, which was, it makes it sound like it's kind of exotic, but that was a typical duty stations for Marines back during that period of time.
Yeah, and Hawaii, of course, was paradise, and
Yeah,
you can't beat that as a post in
yeah,
any
no
way,
kidding.
shape, or form.
Except for
And
he doesn't run into that. He's in the middle of hell straight up on that
yeah,
morning.
yeah, it goes from a from a semi vacation to anything but that. So as I mentioned, there were about 48 planes parked, and remember, and it's been well documented in books and film and everything else that the planes are out parked out in the open, wingtip to wingtip. That there's fears of sabotage amongst the Japanese populace there, and the Japanese aviators come into over these airfields. Wheeler, Hickam, Eva, they're Kaneohe Bay, they're all sitting out in the open and just they just
Juicy
one
targets.
string after another, they just pour in and just completely devastate all of the planes there. They're pretty much all of the planes on the ground at Ever are either damaged or destroyed, and there's plenty of documentation of that. I'll send you stuff, but yeah, the devastation that was wrought to the base, the tent area for all the enlisted men, that was all shot to pieces. I mean, everything was hit.
What was
So
really interesting about your article was you didn't start it out from the Marine point of view. You started out from the
yeah.
Japanese point of view, and to me that was very interesting because now we get both sides of the fight. And did you want to talk a little bit about that, or is that coming up at some point?
Oh yeah, I mean it's I think that's that was the angle I wanted to kind of immediately put the reader right there, and what it's like taking off from the Akagi, and forming up, and what the responsibilities of these pilots were, and they flew in ways that I think that shocked American observers, at Pearl Harbor, and of course that by the time the news got to Washington, how effective the Japanese pilots were, because the Americans had just grossly underestimated their abilities, and of course what happens at Wake Island and other places. They bomb with incredible efficiency, and as we see when the attack ensues, the Japanese again come back, which seems like time and time again. The first string of zeros, Ataya's group, come in from the Akagi. He's in charge of all, I believe it was 43 zeros in the first wave. They just run a string of zeros right over the base and just aiming for the wing tanks of the planes on them. I mean, they know exactly where to put those bullets. They are precise. They're skilled aviators. They come from 20 25 feet off the ground. I mean, it's to the point, and you've probably heard this story too in all the observers on the ground, that they could actually see the people in the cockpit smiling and laughing in a lot of the cases. So um, Lieutenant Commander Takahashi, his dive bombing unit from the Shikaku, returning from their attack from and this happens to Eva. Geographically, they're in a really bad spot because right where Barbara's Point is where the Japanese are going to be rendezvousing after the attack is over. So once they're done hitting, Ford Island and the battleships and attacking, Hickam, they're coming right back around for another pass on Eva Field. So it wasn't just zeros hitting the field. You also have the D-38, Aichi D-38 Val dive bombers with the fixed landing gear. Those planes will make an appearance over Eva as well, and make their presence felt. They drop any spare munitions they have left, whether it be their bullets or bombs, they're going to use on Eva before they head back to the Japanese carriers waiting for them at sea.
Yeah, for the folks that are listening and watching, that might not have read your article, have was Eva specifically targeted, or was it a target of opportunity? Because, like you said, it is over their RP. So did they have it in their mind that that
Yeah,
was going to be an active target, or was it a target of opportunity?
Eva was targeted. If there's actually a great photograph of, and the Japanese had drawn Eva on the map on the actual board on the Akagi, and that was part. I'll send you the photograph. So Eva, yeah, they knew about it. There had been obviously spies in Oahu. They had known the layout. They had known the positions of the ships. They did their homework before they came in. So when Ataya and his wingmen finished their strafing runs on Eva's flight line, there would be 9 more A6N20s that would fly from towards Pearl Harbor, strike targets at Hickam and NAS Ford Island. So the Marines there barely had any time to recover when another formation of 9 Zeros from Shiga, Yoshio Shiga, from the carrier Kaga, they approached the base for another follow-up attack, and any of the remaining structures or planes that hadn't been hit on the first run, Shiga's men came in and to really what was quoted as saying just to ensure their complete destruction. So they flew in repeated passes like the first wave had, 20 to 25 feet off the ground. And in a matter of about 15, 20 minutes, most of Eva's parked aircraft were ablaze from incendiary rounds, both of Mataya and Shiga's fighters. So as the Marines now begin to fight back against the Japanese planes, another instance of heroism. I'll send you this photo. It's a painting. There was a man named Melvin Thompson, Private First Class Melvin Thompson, was at Eva's main gate. I don't know if it's the gate that I showed you or maybe the front gate, but he was out there, and the painting is great. He has that his World War I Brody helmet on, and he's pointing his M1911 up in the sky, trying to take shots at a Zero coming over his head. I mean, it's they were fighting back with every single thing they had.
Yeah.
And a lot of the problems, and you saw this on the battleships, the machine guns in most cases were in lock boxes, and all the ammunition was locked away. So they're frantically trying to go into the storerooms, breaking open cannons or whatever they can get to get all this ammunition and guns in place. So about 10 to 15 minutes after these two attacks, there'll be 2 more fighter units from approaching Eva from the north, 9 Zeros from the 3rd Combat Unit, a Suganami from the carrier Soryu, and an additional 6 fighters from the 4th Combat Unit, Kyokuma Okajima from the Hiryu. So those additional follow-up waves come after the first 2. So what seems like 2 waves really in total seems like much more than that. I mean, they're being hit by multiple waves going in, another follow-up, and then the planes coming back to rendezvous are using Eva for whatever bullets and bombs, as I mentioned, they had left. So Eva was hit hard, but the Marines there are getting their positions in place, going out and fighting the fires in many cases. They'll be dropping their hoses, grabbing a machine gun and taking cover and shooting at the passing planes as they come overhead.
Now, for what's Larkin doing at this point in time? Like, it's obvious. I mean, for the Marines on the ground who are trying to, 1, fight fires and 2, fire
Yep.
back, it must feel like this is going on forever. Now, how is Larkin reacting, and how is he directing the defense? Is he
Yep.
moving around? He's doing what a good Marine commander would do during this time.
Yeah. So around the time of the first 2 passes between Suganami and Okajima Zeros, there was now they were experiencing a heavier volume of ground fire, and this has everything to do with Larkin's direction. Larkin would continue to reorganize, arm, and disperse his Marines at various points around the station, and again, including the group of Marines, as I'll show you in a moment. I'll send you the photo of them huddled around the wooden frame of the swimming pool. There's that's one of the few photographs that was taken during the battle. As you see a group, and they have their Springfields pointed to the sky, and it's great cover because again you can sort of dive down between the ground and the foundation if any fighters are coming at your way. So the not only the defense of the base, but trying to extinguish all the fires. I mean, he's literally trying to do everything he possibly can to try and mitigate the damage that's being done. But there's simply nothing they could do. They can just all they can do is simply go out, fight the fires, and they literally cannot get a single plane off of the ground, and that wouldn't happen towards later on. And before I forget to mention that during the attack, if you remember correctly, and most people have known the Pearl Harbor history, that there was a flight of B-17s coming in from California from the West Coast, about 12 of them, and they flew right into the attack. They were trying to, a few landed at Hickam. I think you had one that landed at Bellows that went off the runway. You had one, I think, that landed on a golf course. 1 or 2 landed on a golf course in the northern shore. So there were friendly planes not only coming in from there, but the Enterprise is on its way back from Wake Island. They send ahead a number of SBD Dauntless dive bombers to the airfield, and I would say about 6 or 7 of them that fly into the attack. And there was one I believe that Larkin witnesses. There was a collision between a Zero and one of the Dauntlesses just outside of his outside the airfield. So there's just all sorts of confusion going on, in the air and of course on the ground. So as over time, and again, as the second wave approaches around 9:30 or so, the Japanese aviators are having a much more difficult time seeing through the smoke that's billowing up off the concrete runway, the concrete parking area. So Larkin orders his Marines to access any available weaponry in the defense of the base in preparation for a second wave of enemy planes. So during the course of this, William Turnage was instrumental in his role as an armorer. He would assist in setting up machine gun positions across the base, which would help deter the Japanese from further attacks. And again, the Marines were now trained towards the sky. They were locked and loaded and literally clearing out the squadron's ordnance room with whatever they could find. Another good story is one of the SBD Dauntless dive bombers, which escapes with relatively not too much damage. Sergeant Emil Peters goes into the ordnance room, grabs 30 caliber ammunition for the gun position in the back of the Dauntless. He hops into the back of the Dauntless, almost like that scene in Midway where there was Nick Jonas is in the back and he's shooting at that Japanese bomber about to hit whatever. So this is, the truth is that he's in the back of this plane getting the belt-fed ammunition. Turner, his assistant, Private Turner, is on the wing of the plane helping with the belt-fed ammunition as they're firing this 30 caliber machine gun at the Japanese. I believe they hit and maybe shoot down one of the planes. Then the Japanese then realize that they're there and they start putting a heavier volume of fire on that position. Peters is hit and wounded. Turner is actually struck and is wounded, and he actually dies. About 3 or 4 days later, there were a total of 4 deaths at the station that morning. And as I'll describe to you in a moment, if you want to talk about the mysterious death of William Lushan. And I've heard a lot of different stories about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely want you to cover it. To me, for the amount of fire put on the field, to only have 4 deaths is pretty miraculous. Actually, it's quite obvious the Japanese were more intent on destroying all the planes and the facilities than they were killing Americans that were on site. Although if they did, that's just, it's terrible to say, but that's the bonus, right? It's really about destroying the airfield and the airplanes on the airfield. Did To me, it makes sense. It's like Larkin is moving around and he's directing the defense. He's pushing guys away from the hottest spots on the airfield to set up the defenses. I mean, what you don't want to do is, obviously, if you're near where the hard stand was, where all the aircraft, you do not want to set up there.
No.
Because that's obviously going to be like a magnet for all the Japanese fire. So
and there are a variety of planes. There were elements of VMF 211. There, I think they lost all of their Wildcats. There were about 9 of them, I believe. There were a bunch of SB2U Vindicators that were destroyed. A Lockheed Electra, I think they had there, that was destroyed. An RO3. They lost just so many planes on the ground. And of course, Wheeler Field, as you see depicted in films like Tora 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 and Pearl Harbor, the destruction that the Japanese wrought there was considerable. So as I mentioned, there were only 4 deaths ever. There were about maybe a dozen or so people wounded. And in addition to, as I mentioned, the death of Turner, who loses his life helping out Emil Peters in the back of the Dauntless that's firing at the Japanese, you have another Marine who was killed, Edward Lawrence, and Carlo Micheletto. Micheletto was actually fighting fires and dropped his hose, got to Springfield, got behind a scrap pile, and was shooting back and was struck by one of the passing fighters along the way. So a 4th Marine, and that is Sergeant William Edward Lushan. He would lose his life under mysterious circumstances during the attack. And when I first started doing the research and I was reading a lot of the after action reports and a lot of Colonel Larkin in his reports and his detail of it, he makes mention of it in one of his reports again after the attack. It was dated December 30th, 1941, and his quote was, "Every officer and man on this aerodrome during the attack, with one exception, and in this case, the report is going to be made to the Major General Commandant, displayed courage, willingness to perform any duty, leadership under numerous circumstances, eagerness to fight." So that one exception is no doubt Lushan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then so the speculation begins what happened, and there are a number of different stories, and I'm sure as you've read, if anyone who reads the article, there were just the rumors that were going around. Some of them are absolutely outrageous. The one that got me the most, I think it's in the article. I know I had it. It was one of the stories. Was that he was supposedly placed under arrest for some reason, and there was speculation that it may have had to do with his German ancestry, and that and there's others that say maybe this type of fog of war incident. Maybe that term comes up as well, but Lushan is placed under some kind of arrest, but he somehow gets out and somehow gets access to either a machine gun or a rifle and evades capture. And then the Marines, I guess, set off in some kind of foot chase. He is behind a scrap pile, and from what it is sort of reported is that the Marines engage in a firefight with Lushan and end up killing him. And the stories at that point are a bit are kind of get a little bit confusing. The one that I was just going to mention was that he escaped from custody, went out into like the cane fields and started burning like an arrow into the fields, trying to like direct the Japanese planes to where
Hmm.
Eva was. That to me was a little bit too
Seems like a bit
outlandish.
sensational to
Yeah,
me. Yeah.
you're not going to be out there. You think, oh, you know what? They're going to know exactly what I'm doing out here in the middle of nowhere, and that to me was kind of it's you kind of tossed that one out right to begin with. There were a few witnesses. Albert Griselli, a sergeant who was actually there and took part in the actual killing of Lushan, described it and said, we shot him so full of holes that we didn't know which one killed him.
Hmm.
So they've there's been speculation, I guess, on what actually happened. And what I read a lot of the reports about Eva, and a few of them talked about it. And there was another one where a group of young boys actually witnessed them bringing Lushan's body out from over the rail spur on the other side of Eva's main gate, and the boys ran up to the car and were like, what's going on. And supposedly, if the Marine was driving, basically told the entire story, he has a pretty big mouth, because
Wow.
it's hard to believe that a bunch of Marines are going to sit there and say, okay, yeah, we just shot one of our own guys, this is exactly what happened. And they made it seem like they told him this whole story. So who knows if that's even true.
Yeah.
But what you can really sort of pull together is that there was definitely an incident, friendly fire incident of some kind involving Lushan.
I wonder if it's with him being placed under arrest, if one of the possibilities is we need all hands on deck. Get this guy out of the rig, out of custody, and give him a
Yeah,
weapon. And then instead of engaging the Japanese, he runs, and then they take extreme measures to deal with it.
yeah.
I mean, there's we could sit here all day and play the what if game with it.
Yeah, and it
Um,
might be, and it might be just as simple as that, and that's a completely logical explanation, as and it wouldn't surprise me if that's the way it actually happened.
but
You know,
it's
I
interesting to me is Larkin's write up of it, where he actually says like
yeah,
every Marine on this
with
installation,
one
with
exception.
one exception, like he had to throw that in there.
Yeah,
I mean, and
yeah, and
and when you're writing up a report like that, that is going to get some attention. They're
yeah,
going to be like, whoa, whoa,
and
whoa, rewind. What happened?
yeah, and
Somebody's going to
that
ask
was one of the
questions.
hardest. That was one of the toughest parts when I was doing the research on it, was trying to look up any information on him, and there was nothing. And that kind of added to the mystery of it, saying, okay, are we just trying to kind of sweep this under the rug? We don't want anyone knowing about it, and it's a done deal. But what I did find in one of the reports, it was they've been doing a number of sort of surveying of the Eva area, and just the National Park Service or the state will come out with these reports, then they'll publish them online. And I read one of them, and sure enough, as I'm reading all the way down, it talks a little bit about Lushan. And I wondered because he's buried in a military cemetery, and if he had done something obviously detrimental or dishonorable in any way to the Marines, he wouldn't be in a military cemetery.
Yeah,
So sure
exactly.
enough, I'm looking at the report, and it says right in the fine print that Lushan was eventually cleared of any wrongdoing and buried in a military cemetery. So again, one of those incidents where again you never know what might have happened. He may have just not wanted to fight and took off, and they may have run after him, and you never know what happens in those instances. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story as I was doing the research on it.
Yeah, that's definitely one. I'm sure my listeners and viewers will probably be digging in on that a little bit to find out more about that story.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so start to finish, the time for the attack that the Marines are under, when it begins to when it ends, what time frame are we looking at?
Well, actually, when I was looking on the map, it's Eva's about 7 miles away from Pearl, and it's just before 7:55. So, but I would say between 7:50 around 7:50 and 7:53, I would say was the exact time is when the attack begins. And as I mentioned, the second wave really hits the base at around 9:30 or
30.
so, and shortly after that, the as I said before, the location of Eva was just not good because Barber's Point was under construction at that point, and they had put Eva on the target map. So Eva was struck particularly hard, but you really wouldn't know it because the base was up and running really shortly after the attack happened. The runways weren't damaged really to any degree. It was just the planes, obviously, they had lost. So once the attack starts to end, and again, you have all the planes, the valves start to hit the base pretty hard with their machine gun bullets and their bombs hitting the base. Not large bombs, ones that are making pretty much small craters in and around the airfield. So they're just sort of taking pot shots or whatever they can find, whatever they can, sort of waste their ammo on before they go back to the carriers. Speaking of this, there's the story of George Welch and Ken Taylor, the two pilots who were stationed at Wheeler Field, who see the attack happening and jump in a car and they take off to Haleiwa Auxiliary Airfield, which is to the north on the north shore of Oahu. There's about eight P40s and about two, I think, P36s. So Ken Taylor and George Welch jump into these two P40s, take off, and the action that the dogfight that ensues happens over Eva Field, and a number of men on the ground see it happening. They see these two P40s show up, and all of a sudden, they're engaging, you know, they're heavily outnumbered, obviously,
Yeah.
over 100 to 100 to 1, and but they still, go in and out of these formations of planes. They shoot down, I think between 6 and 7. They may have damaged the seventh or whatever the case is. So that action takes place over Eva Field, and at the same time, there are more SBDs are arriving at the field from the Enterprise. So the airspace around Eva Field that morning was quite busy.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's interesting too to go back to what you said about the damage to the airfield and the airfield being like put back into action fairly quickly after the attack. I think that there's probably a combination of factors that happens. The Japanese concentrate their fire on the planes and the facilities, vice the runway, and probably the munitions they're carrying. They're not made to systematically crater a runway.
Yep.
So I think it makes complete sense of why the runway is largely intact and put back into action pretty quickly. But yeah, I'd imagine so. It must have looked like fireflies, like flitting through the air, and tracer rounds. Even in daylight,
Yeah.
you can see them quite clearly if you're looking for them. It must have just looked like complete chaos above the airfield.
Yeah, and they're just they're the way they methodically go through their strafing runs, and they're skilled. They've been they're been practicing. They've been in combat, many of these pilots, so they're professionals in every way, shape, or form. And minus a few things, I know there were when they were they had just arrived at Oahu. I know there was an instance where there was a miscommunication where they fired a flare, and it was another one fired, and planes broke off, and they weren't supposed to go at a certain time. So the timing was slightly off. But other than that, I mean, once they got to their targets and they needed to, hit those areas they needed to hit, they were quite effective at it. They said uh, the bases all over Oahu are struck, and again, the Japanese do experience. Obviously, we talked about Welch and Taylor. I know Phil Rasmussen flying in his P-36. I think they count a few hundred holes in his plane when he gets to the ground, and he's up there by himself. I know there's a few others. Sanders, Danes, I just think of their last names. They were up there as well in P-40s, trying to, do the best they could. A number of them were shot down by friendly fire. And a
Yeah.
lot of the planes coming in, to try and land on Ford Island were shot down.
Yep.
And, because the gunners on those ships and on the ground, or anything that comes in within their airspace, they're going to shoot at.
Yeah,
Even
they're
if
they're
it's,
hyper adrenalized.
yeah, yeah. It was
They're
obviously,
there's no reports coming in that friendly fighters are in the air too, so they're really kind of just reacting to, the situation and what they've been experiencing. They're just carrying that forward, and that, yeah, a number of pilots get shot down,
yeah.
unfortunately.
So, following the attack, the airfield is, completely, the parking area is in shambles. There's a photograph I'll send you it is just littered aircraft parts all over the place, and they eventually will, restock, rearm, and the base will expand and will continue its construction from 1942 and 43 into the end of the war, where they ever will be responsible for, the planes that are flying over, Midway are from Eva. During the Battle of 1942, so their role in World War II just continues. The base there continues to expand, and the Hawaiian Islands, of course, continues to be a bastion of activity, for the remainder of the war in Pearl Harbor and the other areas. So, kind of going into the fate of the base. Once World War II ends, once the jet age begins, it's quickly determined that Eva's runways aren't suitable for jet aircraft, and it's, the decision is made to slowly kind of, phase out the base as Barber's Point becomes the more active base just on the other side there. So it's pretty much absorbed into the Barber's Point airfield over time, and by 1960, the airfield itself is deactivated. So as I showed you earlier on the map, a good portion of the runway is still there. You can still see the concrete, parking area, the hangar I told you about that was just to the south of there. That hangar was still there all the way up until the filming of Tora Tora Tora. I think they actually set that on fire, and that was the fate of the hangar. This historic structure is,
They let it
of
burn
all
down for a
things, during
movie.
a Hollywood production, burns to the ground. And another thing too about the filming of that movie, Tora Tora Tora, a lot of the scenes, there's certain scenes where the P-40s will be pulling out of these sort of concrete clamshell hangars. Those are at Eva. I
Mhm.
believe a number of them are still there. So some of those scenes that you see in the film are actually shot at Eva Field. So, if you go there, and the tie downs, rings are still in the ground. The swimming pool, I know they just cleared recently, but you can still see in the ground the borders of it. The stair rails are still there. So they're in the process of clearing a lot of the land out of there, with the hopes that they're going to be able to put money into it and restore it. So I've been in contact with a number of people at AMVETS. Donovan Lazarus is the head of it. He's a retired Army. I don't know if he was a colonel, if he was an officer. I believe he was. But I spoke to him, and he's excited. He has about 12 investors, I think they said. So the Park Service is involved. This man named Louis Berger is also, he's out of Morristown, New Jersey. So he's involved in it. And they have a number of, different donors that are trying to get money and awareness and raised to try and get this project off the ground. They're going to put a number of info panels, kiosks, and things like this with things relating to the attack. And he said something pretty interesting to me. He's like, "We're going to put a marker in each spot where each of the four Marines were killed. I'm like, I was amazed by that they even after all this time know where the exact spots were where these guys lost their lives.
I,
That's
I
remarkable.
I think it's pretty amazing that they want to revitalize this and turn it into it. I think it'd be a fantastic addition to the overall um, experience on the island to get the full breadth and width of the Japanese attack, adding this to the already impressive memorial spot listings that exist. This would be a great one. And as a former Marine, I love to see more Marine stuff out there. And these four Marines deserve to be memorialized. And I think Ava would be a great addition to that landscape that's out there that tells the story of the whole attack.
Yeah, I know the Navy. I think the Navy was actually they just recently sold a good chunk of that land, and I think they're in the process of gaining more and more support there. They released a number of reports. There was one that was released in 2017 around there. There was another in 2019, and the last one I saw was in November of 2020, which was actually the final interpretive plan, as it was known, between Lewisburger, AMVETS, and the National Park Service. So you have all of these different organizations involved, and again, donors and sponsors, putting their name to it. So for the longest time, it didn't seem like it seemed like it was just going to sort of be developed, and nowadays you have people putting Walmarts in Civil War land and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see that they're putting this movement together that to try and create awareness. And the more I spoke to him, he said, you know what, it's a great idea. We're talking about putting like pickleball courts there, to try and get the public using the property and trying to get them there. So I think it's a neat idea to try and you have to try and get people interacting and involved there as well, and creating awareness. But it's still I'm glad they preserved what's there. And again, it's pre 1941 configuration, because you can still probably find. I know they've done a number of underground sonar tests. They know where the old mooring mast post was, where the foundation of it. They know where certain barracks areas where the underground fuel storage tanks were. So there's still you can do a sort of not too much of a deep excavation of that area and still find plenty of evidence of the former base there, and that's a pretty neat deal.
Yeah, do they have any online presence? Because if they do, we could always add.
Yeah,
Uh, well, I'll add the links
yeah.
to the show description if anybody
I
wants to
know
check it out.
it's the Hawaii chapter of AMVETS has all
Okay.
of the Eva stuff on there, so that would be the definitely the place to go to.
Yeah, definitely. We'll get that link and I'll post it up in the show
Yeah,
description. Uh, Josh, this is a whirlwind presentation, and I really appreciated it. I mean, expanding my knowledge base on
yeah.
the attack on Pearl and the outstations, and I really and I'll always enjoy listening and talking about Marines. It's one of my favorite things on the planet. If people haven't noticed, what do you got next? What's coming up for you? I mean, you have
Oh
anything
man,
on deck? Are you in the middle of
yeah,
writing?
yeah. I actually there was a book I contributed to that just came out. It's called World War II Honor and Remembrance. It's with the writer is the son of a Wake Island survivor. David Pearsall, his father, Edward Pearsall, fought during the Battle of Wake Island, and I collaborated him. This is the second book we've done together. So I did some intro stuff, did some writing, put some Normandy stuff in there, and a bunch of stuff. It was great. Yeah, it was such a nice thing to be a part of. And the book just came out, I think, not that long ago. So I
Great.
have that out.
We'll put some stuff in the show
Yeah,
description for you.
I'm working on the project I'm working on right now is a Vietnam one. My uncle who fought in the Vietnam War, he drove M113 armored personnel carriers in Vietnam, and I've just gotten finished interviewing a lot of his guys that were with him, and they have some stories that are just incredible.
Can't wait.
And I'm
Can't wait.
I'm just about finished writing that. I have everything down. I just kind of have to put in some some fine details there. I'm also working on another one about the Bataan Death March, so that should be hopefully underway not too long from now. So yeah, got some stuff going on.
Great. When you're done with that one, let's get you back on to talk about
Yeah,
Baton. Yeah, that'd be
absolutely.
awesome. For those of you who are were watching and we had our tech issues, not to worry for our Patreon subscribers. I'll link up with Josh. We'll get the slideshows and I'll put up the pictures he was referencing. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you'll be able to check those out. Thanks for taking time out. I know we're recording this on a Saturday morning. It's going to pop
It's all
in
good.
another week and a half. Thanks for taking time out to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad I'm able to tell the story of a lot lesser known story of Pearl Harbor. Again, and most of the attention, of course, is on the Arizona, and obviously that's the epicenter of the attack. But not much attention is really given to a lot of the other the fighting that went on with the Navy, Army, and Marines who were fighting there at their air stations. So it's great to be able to get a platform to get that message out and get the awareness of obviously the battlefield preservation. That to me is a big deal, and we definitely need to be preserving all of these these big historic places for future generations.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our tent pole items when Leighton and I decided to make this pod happen was we were going to bring stories that are not generally some of the mainstream, but a lot of them we're looking at the tactical level details, the stories about the people who experienced these actions. And I think you did a fantastic job telling all the stories and looking at it from the Japanese perspective as well. That's
Yeah.
one of the things I've been trying to do is to make sure when I'm presenting that we're looking at it, for if we're talking with say the 101st Airborne,
Mhm.
we'll look at it from the German perspective.
Yep.
I think it's valuable to get the opposition's perspective in here, and I think especially where you're foot stomping the professionalized nature of the Japanese armed forces at the time. Uh, it shows in the methodical nature in which they conducted the attack. Everything from their rendezvous points, their use of RPs and circling back around, expending all their ordnance before they return to ship, the use of waves and timing. If you didn't understand what a professional fighting force they were back then, I hope you got a taste of it listening to Josh's presentation. But as I like to say, when you look at the American armed forces, especially at the outbreak of the war, how unprofessional we were. We were a professional fighting force, but not at the caliber we needed to be. And the steep learning curve that the U.S. armed forces experienced over the course of war that turned them into a juggernaut by the end of the war. And even then,
Kind of like what Larkin says. He says he has a great quote. It just simply says they caught us flat-footed.
they,
And that describes it pretty much in sum total.
yeah. And if you look at the nature, just the weapons usage, like the Springfields and like you were
Hmm.
saying, is Brody helmets and things
Yep.
like that, and what do they look like by the end of the year, and how professionalized is the Marine Corps
Yeah.
by the end of the year, by the end of the war.
Yep.
But anyway, Josh, thank you so much again for coming on, man. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to getting you back on for that baton episode at some
Yeah.
point when you're ready.
Absolutely. We'll definitely get back and we'll cover it.
Thanks again. Well, take care,
Appreciate it.
everyone.
Take care.